coming from, that book, or just in your own experience about when guys do feel like anonymous, or maybe they might need to feel anonymous. What's your thoughts on that?
I like to remind myself and I like to remind others that, hey, remember, you are a human being and you're not a human doing. And the emphasis is doing. And we become human doings that we forget our beings. And I'm actually really curious, Ryan, to watch as we continue on in culture. I'm curious to know the long term effect of what we're seeing today with the exposure and the highlights of really great. I'll throw myself in there. I'm 33. I'll throw myself in this. But I'm curious to see the long term impact and the long term effect of what this is doing to young ministers, to young pastors, and kind of portraying this, in my opinion, a false reality of Christendom or his kingdom. Um, you look at Christ and you look at the gospel, he shows time and time again the foolish things of the world, the lowly, the least. And I feel like if we're not careful, we can always want the more, the bigger, the greater, the more influence. And I might rub people the wrong way a little bit with this next one, but a word that kind of scares me a little bit is the word influence. Because when I look at the kingdom, I don't see the emphasis on influence. I see the emphasis on obedience. And a reason why I bring that up is because when our goal is influence, it's possible to have all the influence but not be obedient. And sometimes obedience doesn't equate to influence. Sometimes obedience means a missionary going overseas, and because of their obedience and following Jesus, they lead one Muslim to Christ, one person to Christ, and it started the domino effect. But that missionary never saw the influence, never saw the big numbers, but their obedience is what mattered. And so I would tell my encouragement to young ministers is, hey, understand God works for those who are just faithful with the little. Why am I going to give you true riches when you can't be faithful with the little? And so I would say staying faithful with the little things, working on character versus working on platform, working on just being a human being versus being a human doing. And then two, I would say, Ryan, you hit it spot on the head. You said something along the lines of those before us, maybe even older, it almost seems like they start to have a downward trend. I would say we need to be learning from the pastors who've gone before us and the things that they've endured and witnessed, and there's wisdom there, and almost a bridging of those where we are now with young leaders being forced to the front, and these guys who are 50, 60, 70, 80, who can kind of speak into the next generation. And so um, I also think we need to understand how short life is and how much of a breath it is. And the wealthy will die and no one will remember them. The influential will die and no one will remember them. It keeps the emphasis on Christ. I think of Psalms 1, oaks of righteousness planted. That's a long time of roots. And so I think the reminder is, hey, let's be about what Paul said of wanting to finish our race and finish our race well, and keeping the long goal in mind versus the short bursts of, oh, I got a lot of retweets on this, or oh, I got a lot of views on this video that I preached. No, and we can say it's in the name of getting Jesus out there, but I'm very curious to know 10, 15, 20 years from now how this all shapes out and what it looks like. So,
Yeah, I'm almost wondering, those guys, it's that surge of, man, I really need to get all of that, and then it just seems like people are kind of almost getting over it a little bit of like, man, I do just need to be faithful where I'm at. I need to be, and man, I think that we do need to have that resurgence of people that feeling called to the middle of nowhere, right?
mm-hmm.
And I'm never going to be, there's really nothing for me to tweet, right? There's nothing for me to, like it. I'm just here with the same people doing the same thing, and that faithfulness, that diligence is that obedience that you talked about. That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
So